are going through grief. And sometimes when they're acting up or not themselves and seem fearful, there's some one thing that is troubling them. And you have to work with them long enough, because they may have interpreted something you said or something that's going on in the family, and they can't sort it out. They can't figure it out. So life is very peculiar. But in talking about us moving to Virginia in 1945, Seth had just got back from the Army. And he didn't know what he was going to work at, and his dad was talking him into moving to Virginia. We were living on that 10-acre farm. And I was working so hard there that I decided I didn't want to stay on that farm anymore. And I didn't want to stay where the coal mines was and ever see one of my sons go into the coal mines. But one day when I went down to the spring to get a bucket of water to drink, I was so troubled that I just sat down on a rock there and thought for a while. And I thought, well, only God can settle this, because only God knows the future for me and my children. And only God knows what they can grow up to be. And I got down on my knees there by that spring, and I prayed, God, please take us away from this farm and take us away from West Virginia, because I'd never want to see my sons go into the coal mines. And I don't want Seth to go into the coal mines anymore either. But please take us somewhere where all of my kids can go to school, where they can have plenty of schooling and grow up to be the people you want them to be, and to do the things you want them to do that you've had planned for them. That they won't have to be a hard laborer all their lives like their daddy has been in the coal mines and out trying to build buildings and stuff to make a living, and trapping and catching furs and selling them and all that kind of thing to make a living. And when I got through praying, I was just as satisfied as I could be that God had heard me. And I went on back to the house and went about my work, not thinking about it anymore. And when the fog all cleared out and the dust settled, I found ourselves sitting in Copeland Park in Virginia in 1945. I didn't know anybody down here but Seth's mother, stepmother, and father, and his half-sister, Ruby. And Ruby then came over to stay with us. And I remember walking all over the place, looking at churches, trying to decide where we should go to church. I passed right by a Presbyterian church. I went and looked at the Methodist church up here, a little ways above the church I go to now, West Hampton. And Grandma Mary always went to a church that was in the rental office. It was one section of the rental office, they had a church in it. And she always went to the Holiness Church. And that first summer that we lived here, my kids went to 3 different Bible schools. They had them at different times. They went to Bible school at Presbyterian Church. They went to Bible school with Grandma Mary. She went and worked in it. And they went to school at the Methodist Church Bible School. And boy, they had a good summer. going to Bible school and meeting lots of kids and making stuff in the schools. But one day I was walking to the grocery store and I stopped on the street corner up here, 58th Street. A woman was crossing the road and coming over towards me, and I just stopped and stood there. And I didn't know that woman. I never met her before. Her name was Rebecca Driver. And she walked up and stopped and started talking to me, and she said, "I don't believe I know you. Where do you live?" And I told her. And I told her what I was doing was trying to figure out where we needed to go to church. I told her I always went to the Baptist church and I was trying to find a Baptist church. "Oh," she said, "my goodness, I'll show you where I go to church. It's right down Aberdeen Road there." And she pointed down here to West Hampton Baptist Church, and it was a small church then. Small sanctuary. And I went on home and put my groceries up. She invited me to come. I went on home and put my groceries up, and I decided to walk back out there to 58th Street and walk down to Aberdeen Road. And I walked down on the other side of the road from the church and stood there for a long time and looked at the church. And stood there and prayed. And asked God if that was where we ought to go to church. And then I got to asking Seth to bring us down here on Sunday nights. And we came to church down here on Sunday nights. So he didn't come to the church. He'd drive us down here, let me and the kids off, and he'd go back home, and then he'd come back and pick us up. And then he decided we couldn't rent anymore. That if we were going to live here, we needed to buy a place. And so he got a real estate person to take him out looking at places. But he always wanted to go way out. Way out, away from town, way out. And when we'd go and look at the places, he would get out of the car and look. And Joe Wellstead was the man that was taking him. They couldn't get me out of the car. And Seth would say, "Don't you want to get out and look?" And I'd say, "No." "Well, why?" "Well, I don't want to live here." And I think Joe Wellstead got really puzzled with me. We went to several places. And I'd made my mind up that from now on I was going to live way out from churches and way out from people. That I needed to be where people were, and my children needed to be where that they could go to school and be with people also. And so one day we were going down Aberdeen Road with Joe Wellstead to look at some place, and I saw a sign in this yard out here said "for sale." And it was the worst run-down looking place. Big old white fence around it, no grass in the yard. The house didn't look good at all, but it was close to the church. And I didn't think too much about that very part of the thing. I thought about the fact that it wasn't a way out. When I saw the sign in the yard, I said to Joe Wellstead, "Stop, I want to look at that place." So we stopped. And the house was terrible. It was filthy and dirty and run down, and windows broken in it. Glass pile, bottles broke up out there in the backyard in a pile. It looked terrible. And I said, "Seth, this is a place I want." And Joe Wellstead said, "You gotta be nuts." I said, "No, I'm not. This is a place we need to have." Well, because it was so run down and such a bad shape, it wasn't going to cost too much money.